awesome. Blake loves Christmas. He always has. He is the type that plays Christmas music all year long. So when I heard he was going to have a Christmas special, I was like, okay, that's perfect because it's just so who he is.
Marriage in Hollywood often looks like a dazzling dream, but behind the red carpets and hit songs, the cracks can be deeper than anyone realizes. Blake Shelton and Miranda Lambert once seemed like country music's golden couple, their chemistry celebrated on stage and off. Yet their fairy tale ended in one of the most talked about divorces in Nashville history. For years, speculation swirled about why it all fell apart, rumors of infidelity, jealousy, and impossible schedules. After a decade of silence, Blake has finally opened up, and his confession sheds light on a love story that was never as perfect as it seemed. Blake Shelton and Miranda Lambert's marriage began like a story pulled straight out of a country ballad. Fans adored the way they looked at each other, sang together, and shared the stage as if nothing in the world could break them apart. From the outside, it seemed destined to last forever. Two of the country's biggest stars falling in love and building a life together. Yet behind the spotlight, tensions were brewing early on. They were both fiercely independent, each with rising careers that demanded constant travel, appearances, and relentless work schedules. What should have been a source of mutual pride began to feel like competition. Miranda was celebrated for her grit and raw honesty in songwriting, while Blake was hailed as a charismatic entertainer. Their different approaches to fame and artistry often clashed, sparking quiet arguments that later turned into long stretches of silence. Blake has since admitted that he wanted the world to believe everything was perfect, but inside the marriage, he felt a constant push and pull between personal happiness and professional image. He describes the years with Miranda as filled with both joy and hidden frustration, the kind of duality that eventually wears away even the strongest connection. The trouble didn't explode overnight, but the cracks became impossible to hide. Fans who followed their relationship closely noticed subtle changes: fewer public appearances together, less warmth in interviews, and whispers of strain that spread quickly through the country music community. Rumors of cheating became a regular headline, painting a picture of distrust that neither Blake nor Miranda could fully erase. The pressure of defending themselves publicly while managing their personal battles privately made the marriage feel like a performance. In interviews, Blake often brushed off questions, flashing his trademark humor to avoid giving away the truth. Behind closed doors, however, he admitted to friends that the constant accusations weighed heavily on him. Miranda, known for channeling her pain into music, would later reflect the tension in lyrics that fans dissected endlessly, searching for clues about what went wrong. Both of them tried to convince themselves that the gossip didn't matter, but deep down, the doubts had already begun to poison their trust. Looking back, Blake confessed that silence did more damage than shouting matches ever could, because unspoken resentment grows louder with time. Life in the spotlight intensified every problem, turning private disagreements into national conversations. Paparazzi hounded them relentlessly, catching snapshots that were interpreted as signs of discord. Tabloids spun stories of fights, jealous fits, and explosive arguments, some true, and others wildly exaggerated. Every time Miranda released a new song, or Blake cracked a joke on television, the media speculated whether it was a veiled reference to their marriage. Instead of uniting them against the pressure, the scrutiny drove them further apart. Miranda felt that Blake wasn't protecting her from the gossip, while Blake believed Miranda used the narrative to her advantage as a songwriter. The imbalance created a rift that widened with every tour, award show, and press interview. To fans, they were the epitome of Southern romance, but to each other, they had become adversaries in a war neither wanted to fight publicly. Blake admitted later that pretending everything was fine became exhausting, like living in a house where every room echoed with what couldn't be said aloud. The weight of expectation turned their marriage into a burden rather than a bond, and there was no escape when the world refused to look away. As the years passed, accusations of betrayal became impossible to ignore. Gossip columns reported affairs, both real and alleged, pointing fingers at Miranda and later at Blake. Each time the rumors surfaced, trust between them eroded further. For Miranda, the suggestion that Blake might be unfaithful cut deep, especially when the names of other women appeared in print. For Blake, whispers about Miranda's closeness with fellow musicians sparked suspicions he tried to dismiss but couldn't shake. Instead of confronting the pain together, they retreated into their separate worlds, Blake burying himself in his role on The Voice, Miranda pouring herself into her music. What could have been opportunities for healing instead became walls of distraction. Years later, Blake revealed that the marriage was like standing in a room filled with mirrors, where every reflection distorted the truth, until neither of them knew what to believe anymore. Trust, once fractured, never fully returned, and that realization became the final note in their love song. Distance wasn't just miles between two cities, it became an emotional gap that neither Blake nor Miranda could bridge. At first, they brushed it off, telling themselves that absence would make their hearts grow fonder. Touring separately, they sent late-night texts, left voicemails, and promised that when the whirlwind slowed, they would have the time to reconnect. But the whirlwind never slowed. Blake was bound to Los Angeles for his role on The Voice, while Miranda's career kept her grounded in Nashville, surrounded by the rhythms of country music and her loyal fan base. Each reunion felt shorter, overshadowed by exhaustion and looming goodbyes. Miranda confided to friends that she felt like she was living a double life, one as a star, another as a lonely wife waiting for a man who was rarely home. Blake, meanwhile, admitted that the distance gave him a strange mix of relief and guilt. He loved Miranda, but often dreaded the weight of their strained time together. The more they tried to pretend it was normal, the more abnormal it became. Even small misunderstandings magnified under the pressure of absence. Miranda would hear rumors about Blake in Los Angeles. Blake would feel uneasy about Miranda surrounded by fellow musicians on tour. Trust, already fragile, began to splinter under the endless miles between them. Friends noticed they were talking at each other, not with each other, whenever they were finally in the same room. What should have been moments of joy instead turned into awkward silences and unresolved fights. Blake later admitted that their love couldn't survive on photographs and weekend visits. A marriage, he said, needed ordinary mornings, shared dinners, and daily life, and theirs had become nothing more than snapshots posted for fans to believe in. Blake's unraveling didn't come with loud declarations. It showed in his silence, his body, and his eyes. Fans first noticed when he appeared thinner, his once broad frame seeming almost fragile. Gossip magazines praised his slimmer look or speculated about a new diet, but the truth was far darker. Blake admitted that he had simply stopped eating. The stress of a collapsing marriage and the pressure of maintaining his public image left him without appetite. He confessed to feeling hollow, as though even food couldn't fill the emptiness inside. Those close to him said he drank more, partied less, and often sat in his dressing room staring into space before shows. On camera, he kept his trademark humor alive, cracking jokes and flashing smiles. But off stage, he was battling a storm of grief and confusion. Divorce is devastating for anyone, but when it unfolds in front of millions, the pain multiplies. Every interview became a landmine, every rumor another wound. When asked about Miranda, Blake often deflected with charm, but later admitted that each question cut him open all over again. He carried the heartbreak quietly because, as he put it, "What choice did I have?" People expected him to be strong, funny, and upbeat, the life of the party. In reality, he was struggling to hold himself together. He dropped pounds not because of discipline but despair, a detail he only revealed years later. Looking back, Blake said his silence was a form of survival. If he had let the world see the depth of his pain at the time, he feared he would have completely fallen apart. Instead, he wore a mask, all while slowly breaking underneath it, until finally admitting years later that it nearly destroyed him. Miranda processed the divorce differently, turning her pain into lyrics that bled across her albums. Music had always been her safe place, but after the split, it became her lifeline. Songs like those on The Weight of These Wings carried raw confessions about heartbreak, betrayal, and the struggle to rebuild after devastation. Fans clung to every line, dissecting her words for hidden messages about Blake, desperate to piece together the story behind the headlines. For Miranda, the stage became a place where she could grieve openly without explaining herself. But while audiences celebrated her vulnerability, Miranda wrestled with the harsh narratives pushed onto her. Tabloids branded her as unfaithful, temperamental, and impossible to please. These labels stung, especially because she felt silenced, unable to correct the record without fueling more gossip. Instead, she let her music do the talking. Each performance was laced with fire, her voice carrying not only talent, but the unshakable pain of someone who felt misunderstood. Offstage, she tried to build a quieter life, leaning on close friends and avoiding the spotlight whenever possible. But the world wouldn't let her grieve privately. Every new relationship she attempted, every appearance at an award show, was scrutinized and compared to her past with Blake. Still, Miranda refused to collapse under the pressure. She leaned into her independence, proving she could thrive without being Blake Shelton's wife. Her resilience became her weapon. Fans began to see her not just as a victim of divorce, but as a woman who could take the worst heartbreak and spin it into strength. Years later, she admitted that while she had moved forward, the sting of being cast as the villain lingered. For her, music was more than career, it was survival, and she used it to reclaim her voice. Blake's healing came from an unexpected place through Gwen Stefani, a woman he barely knew before life's storms brought them together. They met on The Voice, colleagues on a reality show, each putting on brave faces while privately reeling from painful divorces. At first, it was simply friendship, a shared understanding of heartbreak and betrayal. Both were broken, both searching for stability, and that mutual vulnerability became a bond. The connection surprised them as much as it did the public. Rumors swirled almost immediately, accusing Gwen of being the reason Blake and Miranda fell apart, though both denied any overlap. What mattered to Blake wasn't the gossip, but the rare sense of being understood. Gwen had lived through her own nightmare, discovering her husband's infidelity in the harshest way possible. She knew what it meant to smile for cameras while bleeding inside. Their chemistry was undeniable, and soon the friendship turned into something deeper. They laughed together, wrote music together, and slowly began to heal together. Critics called it a rebound, but Blake later admitted it felt more like fate. He described Gwen as a light during his darkest days, someone who made him believe in love again when he had nearly given up. For Gwen, Blake represented comfort, joy, and a surprising stability she hadn't expected from a country star. Their relationship became public quickly, fueled by moments caught on camera, flirty banter on The Tonight Show, playful duets, and sweet holiday songs. While Miranda privately struggled with the sight of her ex moving on so quickly, Blake was finally breathing again. He confessed that Gwen made him feel alive in a way he hadn't for years. For him, she wasn't just a partner, she was proof that love can reappear even after heartbreak has convinced you it never will. A decade later, Blake finally spoke openly about the divorce, and his words carried the weight of years of silence. He admitted that the end of his marriage to Miranda wasn't about a single explosive moment, nor about one person being entirely at fault. Instead, it was the slow erosion of trust, compounded by distance, rumors, and the unrelenting pressure of living under public scrutiny. He confessed that both he and Miranda were guilty of retreating instead of repairing, of letting resentment grow instead of addressing it head-on. Filing for divorce, Blake said, was the hardest choice of his life, but also the one he knew was necessary. Time, he reflected, had softened his anger, giving him perspective on what went wrong. He didn't speak to assign blame or reopen old wounds, but to finally close a chapter that had haunted him. It wasn't about betrayal, he revealed. It was about two people who couldn't make it work, no matter how much they wanted to. He acknowledged the scars it left behind, both in his heart and his music, but also the lessons it taught him about love, commitment, and forgiveness. For Blake, divorcing Miranda wasn't the end of his story. It was the painful middle that eventually led him to Gwen, and the happiness he now holds on to fiercely. His confession after 10 years wasn't sensational or bitter. It was honest, weary, and deeply human. Fans who had speculated for years finally understood. Their love wasn't destroyed by one act, but by the relentless pressures of fame and life. And while the marriage ended, Blake carries respect for what it was and gratitude for how it shaped the man he became. In the end, the story of Blake Shelton and Miranda Lambert isn't just about two celebrities who couldn't make their marriage last. It's about the very human struggle of love, trust, and resilience. What made their divorce so gripping to fans was how much of it played out in public, leaving little room for privacy or healing. Blake's recent revelation, after 10 years of silence, shows that the truth wasn't a scandalous twist or a secret betrayal, but rather the gradual wear and tear of two people pulled in opposite directions by fame and circumstance. For Miranda, it became the fuel for some of her most powerful music. For Blake, it was the pain that eventually pushed him toward Gwen Stefani and a new beginning. Their love story didn't end with a fairy tale, but both emerged stronger, shaped by the heartbreak they endured. Time has allowed Blake to speak honestly, not with anger or bitterness, but with clarity. What once was a tabloid frenzy has settled into history, a chapter closed, yet forever remembered by the fans who watched it unfold like a country ballad, beautiful, tragic, and undeniably real. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to subscribe, hit the bell, and never miss another unbelievable Hollywood truth.